Welcome back to another episode of our podcast. My name is David Levine, founder and CEO of ResTech Solutions. And today we are talking about startup success factors, legal strategy, smart foundations, and risk in the age of emerging technology. And I'd like to welcome today's guest, Douglas. And so, Douglas, if you'd like to take a moment and introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, first, David, thank you for having me as your guest today. I appreciate the time to talk about all of these topics. I'm Douglas Park. I'm a corporate and securities lawyer in Silicon Valley, and I've worked with startup companies for more than 25 years, helping them solve, really challenging business and legal challenges that they face every day. And in particular, I work with companies that are trying to do something new and innovative, but I also integrate my business background into everything that I do.
All right, well, great. Glad you're able to join today. So, from your work on startup success factors and your upcoming book, what are the most common mistakes you see founders make in the first 12 to 24 months that quietly undermine long term success?
Well, the first one, which may not be obvious to a lot of founders, is who they choose as a co founder. What we know, David, is that yes, there are increasing number of startups with just one founder, and that's being enabled by AI. But startups with at least two founders are more likely to get funded and more likely to be successful. Probably the number one factor undermining success in the first 24 months is who the team members are of the founding team. So there's a lot of research that shows that founder dynamics and conflict, or the ability to get along on key objectives and goals, is a really important factor in determining whether or not the startup will succeed or fail. And very related to that is whether or not only the founders, but rest of the team, including their employees, advisors, and board members, can execute effectively to make the startup successful.
Okay, great. And so, just as a quick follow up, then, I guess what would be the one piece of advice you would give someone looking to start up a new business in terms of how they should go about building the team or essentially finding the right people?
Right. Well, I think really good communication at the very beginning is critical. Make sure that you discuss all of the key issues. Like, why are you doing a startup? Is it just for money? Is it because it's your passion? You're trying to achieve a certain dream or make something happen in the world? What about time commitment? Are you aligned on that? Obviously, people have personal lives. They may have families, other things going on. So are you aligned on that? And third, are you in agreement about the relative split and allocation of any equity among the founders? So all of these things not only have to be discussed, but they should be documented in a founder's agreement where all of the founders agree to this.
Well, perfect. Appreciate that insight. And so, you've advised startups across AI, crypto, fintech, and biotech.
Yes.
So, how does your approach to legal strategy change when a company is operating in a highly regulated or fast moving technology space?
Right. So, in fact, most of my clients actually operate in a fastly moving regulatory environment or changing technology environment. So, what this means is that speed is really important, but not just recklessly doing things quickly. One of the things that is critical is to use evidence, some kind of data to guide your decisions. That's really critical, especially in fast moving technology environments. Now, in fast moving regulatory environments, for example, right now in crypto and in AI, it's really important to keep current on what is happening in that legal and regulatory environment. And that is where a really well informed lawyer can help you understand the business implications of the changing legal and regulatory environment.
Well, perfect. And I know from our initial conversation we had together, you said success isn't just about raising capital. So, how do areas like team structure, governance, and market positioning factor into whether a startup actually scales or stalls?
Well, my fundamental idea behind this is something called P alignment. That is, you need to align the people, the product, and position of your startup to increase your chances of being successful. Where position is a combination of the startup strategy and business model. The team, we already talked about the founding team structure a little bit, but is the team structure in terms of skill set really a good fit for the product you're trying to build and the strategy and market position that you're trying to execute? And governance is not only about the board of directors and the relationship with the board of directors, but it's also about how is the key team internally being governed in terms of any guidelines or culture. And then finally, you mentioned market structure. Well, it's really important to understand what's going on in terms of the competitive landscape in your space with respect to your specific product.
All right. Well, great. And as the founder of Park Legal PC, what differentiates how you work with high growth companies compared to more traditional law firms?
Well, David, that's a great question. Thank you for asking that. Well, the first thing that I do is I ask my clients, what are your business goals and objectives? What are you really trying to do here? So, for instance, with startups, it's questions like, what is the purpose of your product or service? Who is your ideal customer? How are you trying to capture them in terms of how you're trying to compete and how you're trying to monetize them? So it's all about business strategy and business goals first. I feel like that is critical to understand before you can really dive into the legal issues. I mean, most clients come to me with the legal issues first, but I take a step back and ask them, well, I need to understand the context of your legal question in order to most effectively help you with it.
Oh, appreciate that insight. So I want to shift a little bit. We've talked a bit about the business side. Want to get more on the personal side a little bit.
Sure.
So what do you personally enjoy most about your role today, especially balancing legal strategy, teaching, and working with founders at critical inflection points?
Well, those three different roles and functions that you mentioned are really all related. And what I enjoy the most is kind of working across the traditional boundaries. That's why I integrate business strategy and legal strategy all the time. One thing that I like to do is I like to think of myself is bridging law and innovation, especially in the startup space. I think that's really critical to do. So that means that it's important to think very flexibly and to connect the dots across ideas that might not necessarily seem related at the very beginning. I think that is what helps me to come up with more innovative and creative solutions.
All right. Well, fantastic. So, kind of this next question is usually one of my favorites to ask my guests. Typically, I'm asking folks about any initiatives, but I know we had talked about the fact that you have an upcoming book on startup success.
Yes.
So, focusing on that for a moment, what problem are you most hoping it helps founders solve before things go wrong?
Well, to me, it's all about execution. And that's what the book is about. It provides a playbook for startup founders and their board members and their investors to help execute. What do I mean by execution? To me, execution is about the ability to make the right decisions at the right time at a very high level. And it goes back to something that I said before, which is in order to execute effectively, you should use evidence to guide your decisions. Yes, good gut instinct and experience are important. But let's say that you have had two successful startups before. Well, they might have been in different technologies or different types of products. And that kind of what worked before may not work today. And especially in a quickly moving and changing legal and regulatory environment or technology environment.
All right. No, I appreciate that insight. And when you're working with founders who are doing everything right, Where do you most often see hidden risk areas they assume are handled but really aren't?
Well, a couple of things. I think one thing is that let's say that you're a startup, you've raised some money, and you feel like we're all good, and now we can develop our product, we can hire more people, and that's what we need. But oftentimes, what happens is that a startup doesn't budget properly. Their burn rate or how quickly they run through their money is just too high compared to any cash flow that they may have coming in. And so what they do is they may say, well, we have about 12 months. Let's say they say, well, we can go for 24 months with the amount of money that we've raised. But it might end up that they can only go for 12 or 18 months. And they have to also consider, David, that it takes about 3 to 6 months to close the next funding round. So you got to plan ahead and you got to make sure that you don't run out of cash.
I really like that one, and that sounds like a very quotable thing to say. I think that's a phenomenal insight. Because I remember even the early days of starting my business, when you haven't done this before in the world of entrepreneurship or being a business owner, you've really got to change how you think about things. You got to leave that essentially that employee mentality behind, and it's a whole different level of thinking. So I really like what you just said.
It is, David. I mean, I've had a similar experience. I started this law firm, Park Legal, 5 years ago. And yes, I had a law firm previously, and I still do have it with the law partner where we do something very different. But when you are the only founder, it's a little bit different. And so you got to handle a lot more, and your whole frame of mind and perspective changes. So I agree with you. It's a different ballgame.
All right. Well, great. So I want to transition a little bit again to a different part of the startup environment, and so kind of. I think really it's going to look more at kind of the operation side of things and what they're using. So as these startups grow and adopt tools like cloud platforms, AI, and remote collaboration early on, how often do you see the technology and security risks lag behind the legal and operational planning?
Well, I think this happens quite often. So, for instance, we know that there's a lot of cybersecurity problems with all kinds of companies, not just startups. But cybersecurity is an issue that must be tackled by all startups. And in the age of I think if you're doing anything related to AI, whether or not you're an AI first company or you're just using AI tools to enable what you're doing, it's really critical to have an AI governance plan. And it's not really clear yet exactly what that should include. A lot of people say, "Oh, we have the answer," but I don't think that's the case yet. In part because of this rapidly changing legal and regulatory environment, but also because of the rapidly changing nature of AI technology. But I think pretty soon, every startup will have to think about establishing a, uh, an AI governance plan that they can actually implement effectively and have their people adopt.
I would agree, and I would even say right now, because I know there's probably not one great answer, but typically what I would like to tell folks is think of it from this mindset. If it's not something you want out there in the public or for the system to train itself on, don't even use it with AI. And that's kind of the general premise that I guide people on today.
Well, I think that's a great way to operate and think about AI. Another one is, there was this recent decision by a federal judge in Manhattan who said when a client generates a document or any kind of legal materials using AI without the lawyer asking him or her to do that, that material created by the client is not covered by attorney-client privilege. So if a lawyer's client just on their own initiative writes up some memo or a draft of an agreement and sends it to their lawyer, well, guess what? It may not be covered by attorney-client privilege in any kind of litigation. And that is a huge consequence of the way that many people are using AI now. And that may also apply in the healthcare context with HIPAA privacy laws.
Yeah, most definitely. And the other thing, I know there's been a lot of question of, okay, if you have AI create something for you, the other question I know that's currently out there and it doesn't have a defined answer is who actually owns it? Who owns the rights to that? Is it the AI? Is it you? So I know that's another big thing that I've seen kind of in the various circles.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
I just have one final question for you today. So, if a founder asked you today, how do I pressure test whether my company is truly protected, not just legally, but operationally and technologically, what would you tell them to look at first?
Well, I'm going to go back to this idea of aligning people, product, and position. I think too many times the founders don't really think about those three factors as one system. If you treat them separately as silos, you're essentially having three horses running in three different directions. So the kind of risk that you're talking about, David, is where there is misalignment among them. So, for instance, are the skill sets of your people really the right ones for the product and the market that you're trying to pursue? If not, you might not be able to effectively get to product market fit, and you might not be able to change your product or your market position unless you change the team and the people, the skill sets that your people have. And another important factor is are your board of directors helping or hindering your startup's ability to execute and to make forward progress? That relationship, unfortunately, sometimes becomes a huge barrier to startups trying to become successful.
So I thank you so much for coming on and all the great insight you shared. Before we wrap, are there any final thoughts or comments you'd like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, there are, David. Thank you. I just want to say that I really enjoy working with startup companies. And the reason is that entrepreneurship is the driver of innovation in our economy. And in many ways, I see it as the American dream. A lot of people want to be able to start their own business, and especially a high growth startup. And I think there needs to be more systematic tools and frameworks to help these founders do exactly that. And that is why I do what I do.
Well, thank you so much again for all the insights. And for anyone who would like more information or to know how to get in touch with Douglas, if you have questions or are looking maybe to get assistance with the startup, we'll have all the information in the description below this video.
Well, thank you, David, very much for having me. I appreciate all of your terrific questions and also the insights that you provided.